All right, left-hand side, we're on page 421 in our textbook. Go ahead and get that open. And we're going to look at number 4. We're going to find inverse cosine of 1. Number 4, inverse cosine of 1. And you'll see some of these written differently. Sometimes they use the word arc cosine, A-R-C. I'll put that in front of it instead of writing it that way, and that's perfectly fine. So just note that when you see the arc, that's what it means. Go ahead, try that out. Okay, we're back. This is actually one of the endpoints of your inverse cosine graph. So let me get those notes back out. Inverse cosine of 1 is 0. If you had some other point in between, you'd need to use a reference triangle and set it up in the first quarter, or the first quadrant or the second quadrant. Okay, but this one's going to be easy. It's going to be 0. Let's try one of those while we're at it. How about number 8? Let's see, inverse cosine of square root 3 over 2. Inverse cosine of square root 3 over 2. Go ahead and evaluate that. Don't use your calculators. Evaluate it by hand. Go ahead and give it a shot. Okay, we're back. The value is positive, so we're going to be in the first quadrant. Always draw your triangle to the x-axis. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so adjacent is square root 3, hypotenuse is 2. If this is not a fraction, if it's a whole number, just put it over 1. Okay, well that's going to be 1. So what is the angle there? Well, that's 30 degrees or pi over 6. So that's number 8. I forget if I said pause. I feel like I didn't. I hope I did. We're going to try 2 more. Let me see what I have here. Let's go to number 24. Number 24 says sine of inverse tangent of 1. Sine, oh my goodness. Paranoid from sleeping in last week's that day. Set 50 alarms. So let's see. Number 24, sine of inverse tangent of 1. Okay, so first try to evaluate that, and then plug it in the sine. Go ahead and try it. Okay, we're back. Let's see. Inverse tangent of 1. Well, again, this is positive, so it'll be in the first quadrant. If inverse tangent was negative, it'd be in the fourth quadrant. Okay, so inverse tangent of 1. Let me draw this in the first quadrant. Okay, tangent of, well, that's going to be 1 over 1, so 1 over 1. So it's going to be square root 2. This is our 45, 45, 90. But that doesn't really matter. Next, I'm going to go to sine. What is the sine of the angle that inverse tangent came out of inverse tangent? Well, the sine is 1 over square root 2. And again, sometimes we'll see this rationalized like that. So find the triangle that you're going to use from the inside function, the inverse tangent, and then takes the sine of whatever angle is there. Okay, let's look at one more. I want to look at 26. Inverse cosine of 7 pi over 4. Okay, go ahead and try that out. Do the middle first, and then plug that value into inverse cosine. Give it a shot. Okay, we're back. Now, the cosine of 7 pi over 4, this is going to be in the fourth quadrant. And if I look at my inverse cosine graph, it has to be quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. So this is actually going to change. Normally, whenever you have an inverse and then the function itself, they just cancel out and you get 7 pi over 4. That's not going to happen in this case because this isn't one of those quadrants that inverse cosine likes. So let's go ahead and do the inside first, the cosine of 7 pi over 4, fourth quadrant. So there's 7 pi over 4 there. Okay, well, what's left over? Pi over 4 will be. Okay, so that will be 1, negative 1, square root 2. Cosine is going to be the adjacent over the hypotenuse, so 1 over square root 2. Remember the fourth quadrant. Cosine is positive. All students take calc, so that should come out to the positive value. I kind of just ignored the negative 1 as I started because I knew it had to be positive, so that one couldn't be right. And so now we are left with inverse cosine of 1 over square root 2. Well, this is going to be different from this. If I do inverse cosine, let me see, I just put this value into inverse cosine. When I do inverse cosine is always in the first or second quadrant. So when I do this one, I have to redraw it. It doesn't work anymore. Let's go to the first quadrant now. 1 over square root 2, adjacent over hypotenuse. And you can see it just kind of flipped it over the x-axis. Took it down here and flipped it up. So my answer is going to be pi over 4. Okay, so equals pi over 4. So the inverse cosine of the cosine of 7 pi over 4 is pi over 4. And you do these problems by noting your 2 or 3 reference triangles. Go ahead and do your 3 questions. And your assignment, we're going to do a couple of days of work on this section. Your first assignment is 1 through 31 odd. Thank you very much.